Hello everyone, this is the channel Scary Stuff. The history of the Soviet Union is surrounded with a lot of myths and mysteries. A lot of information has been hidden from regular people and the public. Those who knew anything about secret USSR projects were forced to be quiet. Today I will tell you about a few secrets of the Soviet Union that became known to the public. In 1948, the Soviet Union created a secret laboratory whose goal was to create biological weapons. This lab was located on an island surrounded by the Aral Sea. Scientists were trying to develop an anthrax bacteria and bubonic plague. They were also working on diseases like smallpox. In 1971, they tested an experiment of their weapon. This biological weapon was supposed to cause a massive smallpox breakout by spreading the disease in the open air. And it worked. 10 people got infected and 3 people died due to this disease. Hundreds of people were locked up in quarantine and 50,000 people in the nearby territory received antivirus injections. The antivirus successfully stopped the smallpox epidemic, but Moscow never confessed about performing the experiment. Only in 2002 was this experiment made known to the public. So it took 30 years for the Soviet Union to acknowledge it. A cosmonaut's death. The Soviet Union wiped out and deleted from records the history of a few cosmonauts who flew into space. One of them was Valentin Bondarenko, who died in 1961 during a training exercise. After he wiped his body with cotton soaked in spirits, he threw this cotton on a heated stove that immediately lit the cotton on fire. When he tried to put the fire out in the exercise room, which consisted of 100% oxygen, his clothing engulfed in flames. It took the staff several minutes to open the door due to the pressure difference. Valentin received burns over his whole body. His hair and eyes were completely burned and he couldn't talk. 16 hours later, he died. This story was kept in secret until it was released after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Tragedy with a rocket. On October 23, 1960, the USSR was developing a new generation of the space rocket R-16. This rocket was supposed to use a new type of fuel. Next to the launch structure were a lot of scientists. One of them noticed a leak of nitric acid. The right decision would have been to evacuate everyone from that place. However, the project manager ordered them to just seal the leak. That is when the explosion occurred. All the people who were located at the launch site died. The flaming ball of fire was so hot that it even melted the rocket's facing. As a result, more than 100 people died. It was the worst rocket tragedy in Soviet history. That's when the Soviet propaganda machine started its work. They denied this incident and said that only a couple people died due to a minor accident. Only in 1989 was the scale of this tragedy made known to the public. Mass hunger. This lack of food and starvation lasted for almost 10 years. 2 to 8 million people died due to starvation. People tried to survive as best they could. They ate domestic animals, including dogs, cats, etc. People ate leaves and grass. There was also reported cases of cannibalism. The USSR, of course, tried to hide all these stories about hunger from foreign countries. Foreign journalists were sent on already planned and prepared trips for them. They were not shown random streets in order to hide all the starving people. All the stores were filled with food, and instead of peasants, the stores were filled with dressed up internal agents. British commissioners and journalists reported that all these rumors about hunger in the Soviet Union are fake. Moreover, when the French Prime Minister visited the Ukraine, he described it as a blooming garden. In 1942, Soviet Union soldiers killed about 22,000 war prisoners from Poland. They were buried in mass graves. Nazi soldiers were blamed for that tragedy. The truth only came out in 1995. This massacre was successfully hidden due to the Soviet Union propaganda machine with the help of British and Americans. Winston Churchill once was heard to say that the massacre happening was probably caused by Bolsheviks, but advised Poland to stop blaming the Soviet Union for that. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was also invested in not letting the blame fall on Stalin's shoulders. In those hard times, leaders of the USSR, USA, and England had to make hard decisions when fighting against Nazi Germany and Japan. Since the alliance of Soviet Union with its powerful military weapons was profitable for England's and America's fight against the Nazis, thus England and the US were protecting the USSR's reputation. The nuclear disaster. The biggest nuclear disaster happened in the city Kyshtym in South Russia in 1957. However, even though it was the biggest nuclear tragedy, it was well hidden and made known to the public only in 1989. The reason for the disaster was a fatal engineering mistake. The engineers didn't properly fix a cooler leakage, which caused the nuclear container to heat up to 660 degrees Fahrenheit and cause a huge explosion that sent 160 tons of cover into the air. The toxic and nuclear cloud was spread over a 12,500-mile radius. The houses of 11,000 people were infected with toxins. 210,000 people were infected by radiation. The USSR tried to hide this tragedy as best they could. Only in 1976 did a Soviet immigrant first talk about this incident to a foreign newspaper. The interesting thing is that the CIA knew about this incident back when it happened, which was in the 60s. But they decided not to discuss this story due to the fear of causing Americans to start negatively thinking about American nuclear technologies. Thank you all for watching. Have a good night.